Well, obviously not an easy Sunday. Mondays always get a little better, but I thought our guys, handled the quiet bus ride home. A lot of pain in the end of that game. But the key to a Sunday is learning from yesterday's mistakes and turning the page. So with a short bye week, that's a short game week. We got to really do a better job of that. So we basically met with them, showed them some things that were positive. Obviously started the game on a positive note offensively to have a play gain that kind of yards. Obviously would have loved to come away with points, but we did start the game with a scoring opportunity. Defensively started pretty well, put in some tough positions and overcame that moment. But obviously a lot of things we needed to correct, especially in that second half. So from an injury standpoint, I think Reggie, he did practice last week, earlier in the week, didn't feel great Thursday, Friday, let the game time decision on Saturday play out. The plan is tomorrow he'll be with us for practice. Our first practice of the week will be tomorrow. We'll go through a walkthrough tonight, but it won't be full speed. So he'll be able to take place in that. Zai hopefully will as well. Zai and Geske are both a work in progress to see where they get for the weekend. But other than that, there were some guys that played in the game that were a little banged up. They got through it pretty good overall. So really shouldn't be any issues other than that. Nebraska is very similar to our situation. They're 2-3, identical records, actually. Both of us have 2 losses in conference play. So there's a lot of different variables going into it. But I think this week is a lot about us. Obviously, Nebraska and what they've accomplished. Played a couple different quarterbacks. They're playing really good on defense. A very difficult challenge. And then Friday night with a short week is one that we've already done this year. So we kind of really, I spent yesterday a lot of time looking at what we did in that Kansas prep, just the logistics of it. I didn't love the results, but more along the lines of preparation. So we're changing that up a little bit on our approach either tonight, tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday before the game to go in from there. So with that, open up for questions.
Isaiah Williams said that one of your messages in the locker room was we have to get better than any team in the country over the course of this week. How important, maybe it's too open of a question, but how important is this week for you guys?
How important is the week? I think every week is important. I think when it comes after a loss, it just comes a little more scrutiny from the outside world, which is obviously part of the world we live in. So nothing different there. I think each week, what I can assure everybody is every Saturday, right, we play a game, and every Sunday, the way we go about our business is really the same. We're very hard on ourselves, very critical. It's just when it's after a loss, and you just hear it from multiple different levels as well. So. I did make the comment to them. I was kind of stressing the importance of the week more than anything, just that. But I believe that obviously we're a 2-3 football team that doesn't like where we're at, but it is a fact of the case. So I think if we don't have that approach, I would be doing an injustice to them.
Not taking anything away from your opponents, but how much do you feel like you're beating yourself as opposed to opponents?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think one of the things you guys have routinely heard me say: more games are lost than won, and the key ingredient to losing. That we stress to our players from the first day I got here to where we are today are penalties, mental errors, and turnovers. And the NCAA, because the mental error is not really a statistic in the NCAA football manual, but penalties and turnovers are, and we're not very good in those two. So I think our guys understand the importance of that. The second thing we probably pride ourselves on is being tough, smart, dependable, and that has to be a resilient part of our program. The way we recruit, the way we coach, the way that we obviously play the game is a big part of that. And I think those two elements right there together are really what's missing from us. Really tried to stress consistency last week. Obviously we're still down 16-13 to half. We spotted them a 6-point off that turnover. You're in the game that I feel is a very winnable game. And to this point, like to replay it back on Sunday, even kind of manifest that more than ever. Just the ability to take place and make critical plays when they happen. We as coaches have to be really hard on ourselves about what we're asking our guys to do. But I do think what we've done, we've played some good teams, played some good opponents, but that was a 1-3 football team that we lost to, right? So we can't ignore that and obviously move forward into a game plan against Nebraska.
You've got a good set of commits so far at this point. When you struggle like this, do you hear from those players? Do you reach out to them kind of say, hey, we're fine? How do you interact with the players when in this situation?
Yeah, I think in recruiting, much like you do with your own players, once you get a commitment from a player, you kind of treat them as though you're part of your program. I would say that as coaches in general, Sunday night, I think recruiting calls are made quite a bit, but Monday, Tuesday, you kind of focus on where you're at. For me personally, I reach out to a lot of guys Wednesday, Thursday. I think last week On that Thursday night, there were we have 18 committed guys. I believe I talked to 13 or 14 that night. Just sit there for about a 2-hour window and just talk. I really like where our guys are at. We'll be getting into a bye week here in a couple of weeks where we traditionally have gone out and seen those guys, but by NCAA rules, you can't do it. But I think one of the reasons we've been able to have some success here over the last 2 years is because of the momentum we've gained in recruiting and going after the right type of guys that want to come to Illinois with a chip on their shoulder, and I don't really see that changing.
Is the comments different than a year ago when you're, off to a great start and winning all those games? There's a tone that's similar or different?
No, last year we started out 1-1, if you remember, right? And I talked to him pretty much every week. So I just think as a coach through 15 years in this business, you understand the highs and the lows. You persevere through the lows and try to ride the highs. But I think each call and each person, each player is an individual scenario.
The change in the short week preparation, were you making notes during the Kansas week and the result was what it was, or are you making changes because of the result?
Yeah, man, that's a great point. One of the things I really try to ask our guys on Thursdays and Fridays during a normal game week preparation is if it's a Saturday game on Thursdays, we have a staff meeting we have an academic Zoom at 2:00. So we have our last staff meeting on Thursdays at 3:00. I try to let everybody out the door by 4:30, just so one night a week they get to have a family night at home. So, but in that meeting, one of the last things I usually say is, hey, take an inventory, how you felt the week has gone. How do you feel Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday went? Make a note of it for yourself, but also for me, like anything we feel we can adjust, adapt. I literally had a meeting with Tank about an hour ago. We meet literally every day, just kind of, he had an early lifting group today because today is a work day for us. Usually Monday's a day off, but we had our entire roster in this morning for a lift this morning at 8:30, 9:30. And then we have them over this evening. So Tank and I are in constant dialogue, just kind of, hey, where are they at? Not just from his standpoint, he's a strength coach, but he's got a really good pulse on our guys mentally. I talk routinely every day with Jeremy Bush, who's our head trainer. Leah's our nutritionist. Anybody that touches our players, I talk probably more than any other head coach, I would imagine. Mike Maziart's our academic coordinator, and literally I have a constant dialogue with him. Anybody that has a pulse or a beat with our players, I want to having a conversation with them, what our guys are like.
Through Zy and Geski's availability, is there any thought to move Isaiah Adams back in, or do you feel like right tackle's the spot that fits where you guys?
Yeah, as of right now, no. We since literally week one, we've had a lot of conversations. I think Isaiah just played his best game at right tackle. Julian, by far, one of the things that gets lost in a loss is players that played well. Julian Pearl played extremely well at left tackle, and a guy like Dylan Rosiak played pretty good at inside linebacker. So there's some guys that probably played really good football that we tend to ignore, and Isaiah took a step in the right direction for sure. I think for us, competitively, we're trying to get our 5 best on the field, and obviously Zy and Geski, one of the downfalls to Saturday was Geski at that point was probably having the best game of his time. He got injured early in the game, tried to come back in, played a little bit, I think wasn't full go, and then ultimately had to get pulled. So the downfall to that is he's a guy that was starting to play really well.
Ideally, what would you like to be known for offensively? And is that a conversation that's ongoing with Coach Lunny?
Yeah. I think every year your offense takes on, the demeanor of that year. Obviously last year, I think on the forefront of it, we probably felt really good about, Chase, that year before he had scratched the surface of 1,000-yard season, but we lost the quarterback that we had called our starter, right? And then had Tommy DeVito coming in, so you really didn't know what he had played. We knew he was going to be the starter, probably coming out of spring ball, but wanted to give you guys some discussion topics to talk about, right? So kind of like this year, I think coming out of the spring game, we had an idea that Luke was going to be our quarterback. Thought that Reggie and Josh would be a combination platter for our tailback. Thought we had a group of receivers in Isaiah, Casey, and Pat that we felt probably were pretty good players at the tight end position. Tip, we had added Tanner Arkin, but I really thought that Henry Boyer and Griffin Moore were going to do some things for us at tight end. And then the offensive lines, I missed the entire spring, so we didn't have him in the lineup, and we were trying to work our way through. We thought we had a couple players that possibly could join us in the fall. That didn't materialize. So the work in progress was probably the offensive line, and I think that's probably stayed true. For us going into game 6, I definitely understand the question. Our offensive identity, probably hasn't come out. I think there's an idea of what we want it to be, but it's definitely a conversation that Barry and I and the offense staff and our players really. I think the one enlightening thing to me, yesterday was not just offensively, defensive, special teams, just the guys that I've talked to, the guys I've met with individually, the guys that, voiced themselves not only during the game, but after the game. There's a genuine appreciation for them that they want to play better, right? I think there's not a lot I can say other than I know a lot of people hang on the ebb and flow of our program on a weekly basis, and I appreciate that, and I love that. Part of what makes our job great. But nobody's more in tune to that than our players and coaches. And I think we firsthand know as coaches, myself as a head coach, I got to coach better. Coaches know they got to coach better, and players know they got to play better.
Last year after the Michigan, or I guess before the Michigan game, after the back-to-back losses, you talked about player leadership and what you got from your captains that week and how you could tell things were, being taken.
Yeah.
Can you share anything after these two
Yeah.
losses?
I kind of keep, I know you understand where I'm coming from. We keep some of that stuff in-house, but I have heard from literally immediately after the game to on a bus ride home to players speaking yesterday that there's definitely, I think the guys that we would foresee as leaders, guys that were elected to those positions, have taken on a leadership role probably more than I have at any point this season. So I think that's a positive step in the right direction. Kind of excited to get out here on the lights tonight and see exactly where they're at. But I've said this before, like everybody concentrates on the players you lose. For me, what I've learned in 15 years, it's a lot of times it's the voices you lose, right? And sometimes players can be a little bit more easily replaced than a voice, right? Like I don't think people understand how valuable it is for a person to say the right thing at the right time to the right person in the most appropriate way, right? Because I always used to get frustrated when I was a young player. I'm like, that coach treats me different, or that coach treats that player different. And I always say coaches they do play favorites. They play the guy that gives the best chance for their players to have success, right? My responsibility when I was an inside linebacker coach was to put the two best inside backers on the field. They gave the other 9 guys a chance to be successful. I learned that from Hayden Fry and really took that approach all the way through. When I was a coordinator, I needed to put the best 11 defensive players on the field that gave our chance to be successful. It may mean moving a player off the field at certain times, moving them to a different position, but your responsibility is to put the best 11 on any given play to make success. And I think that's a challenge as a coach, and as a player to understand that same thing, reciprocal of that, is a big deal.
This week's prep, what's different about Nebraska under the new coach Matt Rule than what you prepared for before?
Yeah, I think good question. The obvious things are obviously the changes that have taken place schematically, offense, defense, special teams. They got new people and new positions. There's new schemes, and then offensively, there's a difference in quarterbacks between the first couple games and the last couple. Defensively, they're very aggressive, multiple special teams. A guy that's got a vast number of experience. They've kind of done some different things schematically in special teams as well. So all 3 phases present different scheme options, but it's about how you play the game.
Obviously, personnel changes year over year, but it seems like last year we saw more short yardage, like sneaks or under center.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys just don't feel is a match with this personnel? I just don't know that we've seen it.
Yeah, no, great question. I think overall, the QB sneak a year ago was probably something Tommy felt really good with. It's just something that wasn't as good a feeling as we have this year. I've learned this in my 15 years in the business. Probably one of the most decorated quarterbacks I ever coached was Russell Wilson. In his college football career with me, he had one quarterback sneak that ended up in a fumble, and we never saw it again. But we were pretty good, right? So, I understand what you're asking. I think part of your point is, define identity. It's in all phases of offense. It's not just first down, second down, third down. It's in short yardage. It's a goal line. It's in 2-minute, end of half, end of game. You got to find an identity in all those phases, which is a little bit easier said than done.
Special teams wise, our kick return, is that a judgment call by the returner out there just in terms of
Nope. It's a game plan decision first off, right, and then a little bit based on wind conditions. A little bit unique in the fact of what we saw Saturday. When we first went out there, the wind was blowing a certain direction. Literally, by the time we came back out after the coin toss, it flipped and gone the other way. So we got to stay on top of it and in which way we're kicking the ball and also receiving. And then I would say that each return game in the punt return and kick return is given a parameter of what they need to do to to take the ball as a fair catch or move forward.
Right, with some uncertainty, I guess, health-wise with the offensive line, does it change potentially that pool of players that you talked about you want to be able to draw on at the offensive line? Are there guys you consider pulling up from the Devo into the second team or whatever?
Yeah. I get the question, but kind of like what we said earlier, I think you have to go into each week with an idea of who's healthy. Right now, if I don't have Zion and Geske, that means 2 new people are added in the lineup just by default. So I think as you go through this week, a little bit determines on what guys are available, who's available to play, and obviously what gives us the best chance. But you always look at, we traveled anywhere from 10 to 12 players on the offensive line. I don't think there's going to be anybody that comes outside of that circle because we have already traveled, 3 guys that are kind of Brandon Henderson being the most prevalent and TJ McMillan, who are the only guys that are redshirt, could redshirt but play, and those guys have been at every game.
A lot of the conversation in the offseason was more pass rush value from the outside backers.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason to hire Charlie. How do you feel like that's manifested to these first?
Well, we haven't probably gotten consistent pass rush, as a whole through the first 5 games, but I do think as a point of emphasis, unfortunately, we had, Alec wasn't full strength last week. He did play in the game, but he's good now. But he was a guy that we didn't know if we were going to have. That brought, I'm sure you probably saw, Zeke was out there for the first time, extended action. So we were a little bit thin, and then us just schematically, we had to adjust a little bit defensively just because we weren't sure we were going to have enough bodies at the outside backer position. But everybody's back to full strength now. I think Seth, Gabe Backus, and Alec Bryan, and then a little bit of Zeke to Jared Beatty, and maybe the defensive line in general. We began to pressure the passer a little bit better on Saturday. Obviously came with a couple of huge stabs, did a couple things on 3rd down. Josh Kreutz got that huge play. That was the hair of a chinny chin chin being a safety. So I like the step in the direction that we made defensively. Is obviously the score, but I made 3 decisions that we just needed to have the ball in our offensive hand. I knew we were down by 3 scores. It made no sense to do anything but try to get a first down in the situation we're in. But that gave the defense the short end of the field on 2 occasions specifically. And then obviously the scoop and score 7 points is no way to spot. Can't spot an offense 3 touchdowns and expect them winning games.
Presumably coming back, do you still see
What's that?
with Reggie coming back? Do you still see a role for Caden Fagan? Can he still help you?
Yeah, I said Reggie. We're going to hopefully get him back. We'll see where he's at as it goes. I think Caden Fagan, through 4 games or 5 games now, has definitely shown the value that he brings. He's an exciting player. I think he's fitting more and more comfortable and feeling better and better about where he is. And I thought the last 2 weeks in particular, he felt really good in all situations. I really admire the way he's kind of just steadily grown each week, kind of made his mark. Last week, you could see him burst through the hole, especially on that one play. Like, he's just a big body that gets through little areas, and he's got a lot of velocity when he runs.
Out of the tight end room right now through 5 games.
I've been pretty impressed with Tip. I thought Tip is a guy, Tip has 2 years of eligibility, and I think he went into the season with the idea of this being his last, but I think he's a guy that on the verge of, he's playing pretty good right now. I expect him to continue to play better, but he's taken his game to a different level, caught the ball extremely well. He's been pretty good inline blocking. I've used him a lot on movement stuff. Griffin Moore brings an element that I think is really good. There was a play there that I thought he had a chance on 3rd down. He got tugged on the coattail twice that, prevented a play from happening, but I really like what he brings to the game. And then Henry Boyer, Henry missed most of fall camp, guy with redshirt a year ago, and I give him a lot of credit. He's found a way to get himself out there and play, and I think that room in general, hopefully on the back end of our season here, is going to be able to give us a lot of Big Ten play.
You feel good about going maybe to a Henry Boyer or even like a Tanner Arkin who got out there?
Yeah, I think the bigger we get, 13, you've seen it. We've had 3 tight ends out there. I don't think you can plan much bigger than that. I don't think we're a 4 tight end team, but 13 is definitely been in our game plan the last 2 weeks. I don't think we saw it Saturday just by the flow of the game, but that's definitely something that I know our guys offensively feel good about. Thank you.